Today we are looking at the topic of inflation and deflation, and we are going to start off first by talking about inflation. What exactly is inflation? If you look at the definition, inflation is a sustained increase in general price level, or we can also say that there's a decrease in the real value of money, so people have less purchasing power. Or we can also say that when inflation rises, when general price level rises, each unit of our currency is able to buy lesser and lesser goods and services. But to simplify things, what exactly is inflation? Things are actually becoming more expensive in the economy. We have less purchasing power. We're able to buy less with our money. That is what inflation is basis. Now, how exactly do we measure inflation? There are two common ways to measure inflation. The most common indicator to measure inflation will be a consumer price index. I want you to imagine a basket of goods and services. Of course, it's a figurative basket and not a literal basket. Within this basket, we place all different types of necessities like food, water, price of healthcare, education, transport, various things. So what we expect in this basket of goods and services would be how much would a plate of chicken rice cost in Singapore? How much would price of a liter of water cost? How much would the price of a bus ticket cost? How much would it be the price of a train ride? How much would be the price of a 3-bedroom HDB flat? How much would be the price of toilet paper? So all of these things, we track these price changes and we give these an aggregated score, and we when taken as a sum, we say that this is the consumer price index. Now, of course, different goods and services are given different weightage by the government. Some are given more heavy weightage, some are given a lighter weightage. And that would be what we call the consumer price index. So we measure the change in this consumer price index to measure inflation. In many countries, there's a second indicator that's being used, and in Singapore, we also use this second indicator called core inflation. What is this core inflation? Core inflation, simply put, is exactly like the consumer price index, but we exclude certain items from calculation. In our case, we exclude two things: price of housing and price of cars. Why do we exclude these two things? Well, my guess would be that number one, housing and cars are very volatile to price changes because we have changed in government policies relating to housing and cars all the time, and that's because we live in a land scarce Singapore. Right, so secondly here is that housing and cars are not things that you buy on a daily basis, so it may not affect your purchasing power that significantly as opposed to your necessities like bus ride, train rides, and cost to visit a GP, a general practitioner. So that's core inflation. Now, who is usually concerned with inflation? Of course, I think many of you already know that the job of actually keeping inflation low and stable is left to central banks. Now, central banks generally, they will control the size of money supply through open market operations and changing interest rates or changing bank reserve requirements in order to actually influence money supplies in order to actually address the problem of inflation. And what is usually considered to be an acceptable level of inflation is that most central banks actually target a magic 2% rate. Why? Because a 2% inflation rate actually signifies a healthy and growing economy. But how come 2%? Why do you want to have some level of inflation? And why is this number 2%? Now let's look at this diagram over here. You see here, when your economy is here at AD0 and you're operating in Y0, you are some level away from the full employment level. When AD increases from AD0 to AD1, you see that output actually increases from Y0 to YF, means there is some economic growth. But at the same time, there is also going to be some inflation where prices go up from P0 to P1. Now, what that really means is that typically when you have economic growth, okay, you also have inflation, which means to say that inflation is seen as a kind of like a side effect to healthy economic growth. So you want to see a little bit of inflation, and when you see a little bit of inflation, it signifies that the economy is healthy and growing. So that's why central banks usually have a target rate of 2% inflation rate.